yet, but I should. But I'm curious how bad this is. How shady is this to file a fake lawsuit and with no intention of actually following through on it or ever identifying John Doe's, like a totally fake lawsuit. And by the way, as y'all know, they filed this fake lawsuit and then immediately they subpoenaed Steph Jones to get their hands on these texts that she had basically already given them or told them the contents of, right? And then right before Blake Lively in December files her CRD complaint and that New York Times article comes out in December, right before that, this fake lawsuit is withdrawn. So it's just like it couldn't be any more obvious that this was a sham and it was a shady, unethical tactic, legal tactic. And so I'm just curious, my lawyer friends weigh in on this. Are we talking about behavior that from a lawyer's perspective is so shady that they could get disbarred, that there could be serious consequences? Or are we talking about something that is, it's just shady, but it's not like the level of getting disbarred? I don't know. But it looks really, really bad. And I am just not going to listen to some of these Blake Lively defenders online who are trying to tell us that this is just normal, standard practice, normal procedure. There's nothing to see here. Oh, y'all move along. Come on, you're making something out of nothing. No, this is beyond, and I've seen lawyers talking about this online, like on Popcorn Planet, and even in that Daily Mail article. This is beyond that. This is malfeasance or borderline malfeasance here. You are not supposed to manipulate the legal system and the courts with this bullshit and clogging up the court system with fake lawsuits. But see, the thing is, as you all know, they didn't want to come out. Team Blake Lively didn't want to come out with an actual subpoena, official subpoena of Steph Jones, because first of all, it would give away the fact that Blake Lively's team already knew what was in those texts and where to look. And that's the thing that people are talking about tonight. I told you that, in the description for this video, that things just keep getting worse. And we're learning more and more disgusting, shady things that Blake Lively and her team have done. Well, what I'm talking about here is that when you look at the way that the subpoena, they knew exactly what to ask for and where to locate it. And that tells us, again, that Blake Lively and her team, they already knew the contents of these texts because they knew exactly where to go and where to look. It's just so shady. And one second, I had asked CJ, citizen journalist, if she wanted to join me tonight, and she can't. She's got stuff going on, but next time. And what's up, CJ? Everybody needs to check out citizen journalist CJ online for lots of Blake Lively saga news, and then Leanne Newton is just tearing it up. She has legal training or a law degree, and she is just constantly, I don't know what we would do without her, honestly, in the Justin Baldoni support community, so to speak, because she is just constantly breaking this stuff down, looking through all the legal documents as they're filed. And so anyway, and look, y'all, I know there's a lot of controversy. I don't really understand it about who found this fake lawsuit first. And like, I had been told that it was without a crystal ball and that the Daily Mail had been basically sitting on the story. But then I saw that the Daily Mail guy was on Zach's show, and it seemed like they had a really cool exchange, and people were responding well to it. So I don't know the situation, and I'm sorry if I cast aspersions, negative aspersions on the Daily Mail or on Josh without knowing the full story. That was not my intent. Again, like I have a job and things in my life. Like, a lot of you are really crazy right now, and I don't always like keep up with everything or know exactly all the time, like where something came from or who got it first or whatever, right? Anyway, I haven't gotten to the rant part, by the way. I'm just getting warmed up because I have been traveling and I've been doing a lot of shit today, and you can see just by looking at me, I'm sure. But I'm at someone else's house, and so I'm warming up to this, but there is something that made me really mad today, and I don't want to talk about it quite yet. Again, I want to kind of just lay the groundwork here and stuff before I get to the thing that really made me mad. But the level of shadiness that we found out about with this fake complaint, this fake lawsuit, and the fact that, as Brian Friedman said, Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds, they were doing this runaround. They didn't want people to know that what they were actually doing. They wanted to get the jump on Justin Baldoni and surprise him and make sure that they could just really destroy him. So they do this shady runaround, and it is unethical, and it seems like it's malfeasance or it's borderline malfeasance, and that's where we are. But my point is that just when I think that I couldn't regard Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds any more poorly than I do, something comes along, they do something, I find out something, and I think, my God, these are some shady, messed up people. Maybe not demons, but some really, really messed up people. And narcissists, I guess, I don't know. I get tired of all these labels too, because really what I want to say is, instead of narcissist or borderline or whatever, I just want to say these are shitty ass people. We talk about Blake Lively, Ryan Reynolds, Evan Rachel Wood, Amber Heard, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So let me engage with my chat, because I want to do that a bit more than normal. So hello to my mods. I don't even know if I have any mods on right now, but hello to them anyway. Laura B and Vanessa and Rebel Bird and AJ, as always. So what's up, everybody? Please show us pictures of your cats. I will next time. I don't have any because they're new. I should, but I will next time. I have pictures, unfortunately, or fortunately, of my old cats, but I'm still in that phase where it's really sad. I miss them a lot, and it's really sad to look at old pictures, but hopefully in videos, but hopefully at some point I will. There's one of my mods. Hello, Laura B. Thank you for being here. And again, sorry for the poor quality on the audio and the video. It's not that bad, I guess. But again, I'm not at home. Laura B says, really shady. I hope the judge finds them at least. Yeah, and Leanne brought up something that I want to talk to y'all about a bit. Again, there's so much great coverage, Zach and Dana and CJ and so many people, but Leanne is just, and I think they would all agree, she's a fucking powerhouse. No offense, girl, but you're a fucking powerhouse. Okay. But there's something that she mentioned here, and I just saw it recently, and I wanted to ask y'all about it or talk about it here. So, sorry, one second. Okay, here. So Leanne writes, oh, let me make it bigger, sorry. Okay, so she's referencing a post by someone that goes by Ludwig online, and Ludwig writes, I found something interesting. Here she says, in the Deadline article, there was a Deadline article that just came out about this, the fake lawsuit, but just basically rehashing what we've all been talking about online anyway. But it says, I found something interesting in the Deadline article. It mentions that the Van Zandt again is the fake company, the name of the fake company. The Van Zandt subpoena requested all information from December 1st, 2022 onward. However, on February 28th, Judge Lyman partially denied the subpoena, citing that it was too broad in relation to her actual lawsuit. So what's being pointed out here, as you can see, is basically that the fake lawsuit request aligned with this request that Blake Lively's team had made recently of the judge in this case, Baldoni versus Lively. It aligned with the same dates, the same period that she was requesting, that both of these lawsuits, the fake one and the real one, were requesting access to these particular texts and stuff. So again, just there's this alignment here. It's obvious what they were doing. But Leanne says, sorry. Leanne writes, great find here. The sham subpoena had the same ridiculous and overly broad requests that the subpoena Lively requested, but Judge Lehman quashed all information from 1st December 2022. Judge Lehman is going to be pissed off here. And then I want to look at comments for a second. So Jackie says, would the judge realize this issue only if someone brings that issue directly before him in some kind of motion, or is the thought that the judge would recognize from documents already filed? Anyway, so I thought this was interesting because, again, these are all indications, all clues here that the sham lawsuit was intended to do the work that the actual lawsuit should be doing, right? And that's one thing that's so unethical. I want people to understand that's one thing that's so unethical about this is that you're supposed to be in legal proceedings like this. You're supposed to be above board where your opponent and the person who's accused or the other side can see the moves that you're making and can like be prepared for them or deal with them or have access to that, right? And so by filing this fake lawsuit, this sham lawsuit, then Blake Lively is able to circumvent that, and she's able to do this without anyone knowing. That's just not, it's just not cool or okay. Okay. Let's see. Goth Guy Crash says, it's scary that Me Too was to protect people, but is used to destroy innocent people. Yeah, it is. And that's often how things go in revolutions, I have to say. I made a video one time talking about the French Revolution, and because I'm interested in history and stuff and used to teach some of these things. And what you find with so many revolutions is that they're very well intended. Now, there are people who are shady or people who are out to get what they can get, or they're corrupt, or they have ulterior motives. But often you find a real idealism in revolutions. And what happens is people, they lose sight, they get narcissistic, they lose sight of themselves, what have you. And these things end up becoming corrupted. They end up going sour. And worst of all, they end up becoming the mechanism for the persecution of innocent people. And so, like, we've seen that so many times. The American Revolution, thank God, was an outlier. That really wasn't the case. But you look at most revolutions, and like the French Revolution, and it becomes a bloodbath, right? Okay, what else? Natalia says, the issue with this vague lawsuit using a company that has no contractual relationships with anyone is that it could technically be used to obtain confidential information of anyone in the U.S. Oh, that's a really good point. That's a great point. I hadn't thought of that. But you're right. You're right. Andy P says, wonder what else they're guilty of doing, Blake Lively's team. Oh, I love this Fabuloso ad here. Sorry, I'm so tuned out. Not even paying attention to what we're looking at here. It's trippy, dude. I'm laughing at this cleaning ad that it didn't even register with me until now that that's what you all are looking at. What happened to the Baldoni article? Oh my God. Hold on a second. So back to your comment. Wonder what else they're guilty of doing to have been so bold to proceed with this heist. They were obviously confident they could get away with it, which suggests to me that they have done so before. I was thinking something along these lines earlier, and this was another point that I wanted to make over the course of our conversation here tonight, is that whenever you see, it's like roaches, it's like cockroaches. I don't know where you live, if you have an issue with cockroaches and water bugs, but where I live, it is a real problem. And I don't mean in my house in particular, right? People around here, you got to get the bug spray, you got to get Terminix to come and all that, right? Or you're going to have a bad time. But just in general, one of the most unpleasant things about living in this part of the South is grotesque, huge cockroaches and water bugs. And one of the most disturbing things about seeing one of these things in your house is that apparently if you see one, it means that there are like 1,000 of them in the walls that you cannot see crawling around at that very moment. And I feel like, in reference to your comment, I feel similarly about this. If what we're seeing, what we know about, it's this shady, I'm talking about the shit that Blake Lively and her team have been pulling. If it's this bad, the stuff that we're seeing, think about all of the stuff that we don't know, that maybe people are never going to find out or recognize. I mean, just these people, again, are truly shady and very corrupt. And I think that, and you're alluding to this here, what must happen for a number of celebrities who go sour like this? I mean, maybe they were always sour or narcissistic or whatever, shady. But I think that what happens is they are so used to being adored by so many people all the time, automatically, and getting away with all kinds of shit, that they just go deeper and deeper and deeper. You know, it's like, it is kind of Shakespearean. It's like in Macbeth, what's the tragedy at the heart of Macbeth is that this guy starts off at the beginning of the play as a highly moral, highly respected, one of the most respected, actually, nobles in the whole realm, trusted eminently by people around him, including his king. And he becomes narcissistic and kills the king, takes the throne. And what happens to him, what happens to Macbeth, is that he gets deeper and deeper and deeper into his own delusional, narcissistic thinking. And I feel like that's what happens here with people like this. And we saw it with Amber Heard, and we see it with so many of them, is that they, at a certain point, they drink their own Kool-Aid, or they get so accustomed to being fawned over constantly that they just kind of lose it. They enter into this delusional state of thinking. But I agree with you. If what we're seeing, if we're seeing this shadiness already, just imagine what Team Blake Lively, Ryan Reynolds has been up to that we don't know about, or what they've considered doing. Right? I'm not saying that they've considered killing someone or something, right? But I'm just saying, like, imagine if we're only seeing some of what they actually enacted, followed through on. Imagine all of the schemes and scams and shadiness with all of this that they've been entertaining. I don't know. I'm going to run to the restroom, and I'm going to get some water, and I'm going to be back in 5 minutes. I promise it won't be any more than that. But I want to put on something because this was something that I wanted to talk about. And I'm not going to get into rehashing Amber Heard and Johnny Depp and all that. But look, when Blake Lively, when it was announced that she had made the Time Top 100 Most Influential People list, when I saw that, do you know what it reminded me of? It reminded me of all of those fucking honors that Amber Heard got before she was exposed. I mean, she was a UN ambassador of some kind. She was a domestic violence representative for all these different organizations. She spoke at the LA Women's March, and it was ridiculous. It was absurd, and it was disgusting for people who knew the truth, I'm sure. But that's what this reminds me of this Time 100 thing. And so I want to talk about that a bit. And so I want to show you something. Anyway, if you've seen my work, maybe you've already seen this, but I'll be right back. Hold on.
To so many women, you know.
16, what did you do for?
I can't believe Amber beat your ass.
She really did whoop your butt. Oh, we're not talking about it.
And you perpetuate the fight. You perpetuate it when you run away. You start it when it could just be a petty argument. And you make it not a petty argument because you run away.
Avoid fights. And by the way...
Yeah, let's be perfect.
And by the way...
Why don't we just perfect? Why don't we just live in make-believe? Go fucking suck my dick, you fucking cowardless, ballless piece of shit. You got hit. I'm sorry I hit you like this, but I did not punch you. I did not fucking deck you. I fucking was hitting you.
Ever touch Johnny Depp with a closed fist in the history of your relationship?
This is the state of Washington versus Amber Van Ree, cause number CPS 013-529. Stephanie Sada on behalf of the state. Ms. Van Ree is present in custody with counsel.
Yes, Your Honor. No, Your Honor.
Amber, did Johnny give you that bruise on your face? Did Johnny beat you up?
Stop.
Did Johnny brutalize you?
Stop.
Amber?
You didn't expect a TMZ employee to show up to testify that TMZ had been alerted that you would be at the courthouse and knew exactly which side of your face to take a picture of, did you?
And in 2016, what did you do for a living?
I worked as the field assignment manager at TMZ, an entertainment news website and television show.
What was your team of paparazzi supposed to do while they were at the Los Angeles courthouse on May 27th, 2016?
Their objective was to capture her leaving the courthouse, and then she was going to stop and turn towards the camera to display the bruise on the right side of her face.
Stop it. Stop.
Voices, minds of people, daughters of a generation of equality. Yes, fuck yes. Enough is enough. Time's up. Me too. All the lives matter. It is worth fighting for a world where things are better.
Please welcome Rebecca Ruiz, senior features writer at Mashable, in conversation with Amber Heard, actress, activist, and human rights champion of the United Nations Human Rights Office.
It happens to so many women, you know, when it happens in your home behind closed doors with someone you love, it's not this straightforward.
If we change the system in place, that keeps them quiet. Speak up. Speak up. Raise your voice. Your voice is the most powerful thing, and we, together, as women standing shoulder to shoulder, cannot and will not any longer accept silence.
This is also a picture of you and Miss Pennington on May 28th.
You will never know true. Every day since then, I am missing by today. Ranking Member Jackson Lee and distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for inviting me to testify today. My name is Evan Rachel Wood, and I'm an artist, but I am also a domestic violence and sexual assault survivor and the single mother of a young boy. When I was 5 years old, I started working in film, and every day since then, I worked to reach the very privileged place I'm aware that I occupy. And I'm here today to use my position as an artist, survivor, mother, and advocate to bring a human voice to the population of 25 million survivors in the US who are currently experiencing inequality under the law and who desperately need basic civil rights. I struggle to speak to you today because I'm not sure what words are appropriate when discussing this issue. However, if you can't hear the whole truth, you will never know true empathy. And I believe in the saying, if we have to live through it, then you should have to hear it. This past year and the massive movements such as Me Too and Time's Up have been extremely empowering and validating for survivors, but also incredibly painful. While no one had to tell me that rape was such a worldwide epidemic, to see the flood of stories so similar to my own was both freeing and soul-crushing. Waves of memories and detail came flooding into my brain every time I read the words. I froze. I thought I was the only human who experienced this, and I carried so much guilt and confusion about my response.
You'll be back! Emus can't help people customize and save with Liberty Mutual!
Of Freud.
Starting to realize that maybe
For survivors. Oh, man. Oh, man. All right, so there's another part that really cracks me up, too, in this show. And it's when Evan Rachel Wood is complaining about the Justice for Johnny Depp movement and how that silenced victims and so discouraging to victims and all of that. And she uses this crazy metaphor. Listen.
People are just foaming at the mouth for survivors' voices to be, discredited or taken away.
Ms. Heard shouldn't be claiming that she's a domestic violence survivor and lying about it.
My sense is the pendulum is swinging the other way. People are looking at these cases and starting to realize that maybe we've gone a little too far with this maxim that you must believe the woman whatever she says.
The way it feels right now, being a survivor that's come forward in the wake of Me Too, after survivors have had their moment, it feels like oh, we've just had a joyride in Dad's car. And now we're home and Dad's there and he's like, well, I hope you guys had fun because you're fucking grounded. Like, and now we're in the period of, I hope you enjoyed your joyride and your moment of power because now you're really going to get it.
Look, this is what I want you to understand here. This is such a tell. This metaphor that she uses and actually discusses in a sort of extensive way here. This is such a tell that something is deeply, deeply wrong with her and with her allegations against Marilyn Manson. Because she depicts the struggle of a supposed sexual assault survivor and Me Too accuser, as she's purporting to be, and as she sees other women. She depicts that as a joyride, as the equivalent of someone stealing a car and going on a joyride. This is such. By the way, do you know who was sitting next to Evan Rachel Wood when she testified before Congress? So in the video that you saw of her testimony there, and yes, that was in front of the Congress, Washington, Capitol. When she testified, she was sitting right next to Amanda Nguyen. And Amanda Nguyen is a hardcore Me Too activist, and she just happened to be one of the astronauts on the Blue Origin flight. And this was something that was such an eye roll for me. A lot of people didn't know who Amanda Nguyen was, and so it wasn't of any significance to them. But the fact that one of the people that they were sending into space to supposedly represent women, the fact that one of them was this hardcore Me Too activist who sat right next to Evan Rachel Wood when she spewed all of those lies and all that bullshit. To me, that was just icing on the cake. And I'm going to talk in a little while about the Blue Origin thing because it really did annoy me. My significant other, he's a little baffled as to why I was so annoyed by it. And he was like, come on, what's the deal? Like, it's a fun ride. They're entitled to go into space. And I mean, what's the problem here? And I know it's not cancer or whatever, right? It's not the end of the world, but it really annoyed the hell out of me. I'm curious, those of you in my stream, sorry, I'll stop messing with the image. I'm just trying to give us a visual aid here. I've noticed, as I've said before, that my streams do better numbers wise when I do have something for people to look at other than myself. Did it annoy you all? So tell me in the chat, were you annoyed by this female power, I'm woman, hear me roar, female astronaut, joyride, 11-minute joyride? Were you annoyed by it? Were you annoyed by the way it was promoted? I don't have a problem with these women going into space. If, look, free country, Jeff Bezos, billionaire, owns this company. If he wants to send his fiance into space and her big boobs into space, he can do that. But I just hated the way it was promoted. I just hated it. It was just gross. I don't know. What do y'all think? I'm looking in the chat here. Let me scroll down. Let's see. We've got, let's see. Oh, here's a question, not about Blue Origin, but Andy P asked, do you think the consequences will even phase Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds? They'll just go underground for a year, rebrand, and come back with everything forgiven by Hollywood elite and forgotten by the public. I don't think Blake is going to be forgotten for a long time, but Ryan Reynolds, he does have that Deadpool thing. And I agree with you on him that he's got a pretty Teflon situation. It's not going to stick to him in that respect, but it's going to be a long time before he is this beloved figure in the public eye. I do think that a lot of the shine has worn off been taken off Ryan Reynolds with all of this. And, if he's as narcissistic as I think that he is, and as we're daily finding evidence of that fact, then I would have to think that would bother him. Isn't that the thing with narcissists, is that underneath all of that bluster and that egotism, they're actually extremely fragile and can't handle criticism, can't handle people thinking negatively of them, and are obsessed with their image. So I do think that on some level he's got to be suffering with this. But I agree with you on his career. I do think Blake is her career is ruined for a while. She has a ton of money. I guess she can keep going. She's not going to be in the poorhouse, but I'm sure she can find some projects to star in or participate in. But I do think that the luster, whatever luster she had and promise with her career, I do think that be in the rear view mirror, I think. So Goth Guy Crash writes, the Channel 4 documentary on Manson actually upset me. I remember watching it the night the episode's released. Yeah, it's always very upsetting to see representations of someone that based on evidence and reliable testimony and so forth, these representations are not true. It's very frustrating. What I'm happy about, and I know you and others are, is that whether we're talking about Johnny Depp or we're talking about Marilyn Manson, they have finally been able to pick up with their careers and make films and music videos and songs and go on tour and produce art. And I do think that that's one of the things that really sustains both of them. I don't have any inside knowledge, but I would imagine. And Manson even has said this year repeatedly that his life is his art, or his art was one of the main things that he lives for, right? And so I am glad that the cancellation did not stick. But it has been, as Manson writes, a long, hard road out of hell for him, for Johnny Depp, and for others who have been falsely accused. Again, not everyone, but others who have been falsely accused. I'll get back to some of that, but let's talk Blue Origin for just a second, since we're here. April Love writes, Amanda the astronaut. So this is kind of interesting. Amanda Nguyen, a couple of days before the Blue Origin flight, I looked at her Wikipedia and it said astronaut. It labeled in the first few lines, it labeled her as an astronaut. So Amanda Nguyen is a gender activist, sexual assault survivor advocate, et cetera, and astronaut. And then I noticed several days later, after they'd received all that criticism, these ladies, that had been changed, and it now said Amanda Nguyen was a passenger on a Blue Origin flight. So I don't know if that was just someone going in there and changing that, or if she actually got shamed and she changed it, or had one of her people change it, or whatever. But I thought that was interesting. Yeah, not an astronaut. And I posted something. Some of you have seen this. And then I'll go back to Blake. Don't worry. I'm going somewhere with this because actually I think that this flight is related to the Blake Lively bullshit. And I'll get to that in a moment. But the other day I posted this picture of two supposed astronauts. This is on Twitter. Hold on, let me make it bigger. So, two astronauts here, or two women who have been described as astronauts. And some people may not know the woman on the left. And so, just quickly, let me read to you what I wrote here. I wrote, when I was a little girl, NASA gave one exceptional civilian, the woman on the left, a chance to go to space, real space, not just an 11-minute joyride. But NASA did not take this honor lightly. They selected this woman from a group of 11,000 applicants because they wanted only the most exceptional and deserving individual to have this honor and this opportunity to represent real people in space. This woman was not going to be mere camera candy, though. Oh no, she spent months in rigorous, grueling physical and technical training, learning how to do real astronaut stuff because NASA expected her to actually do shit up there and not just sing songs and squeal. Everyone understood that a space mission shouldn't be squandered, and so this woman prepared for a range of duties, experiments, and lessons that she would teach American kids from space. This exceptional woman, Krista McAuliffe, didn't get the chance to finish her journey. Unfortunately, I think most people know that the space shuttle exploded. She went up into space and into God's arms, as the president said. So here's the thing. It infuriates me that Blue Origin tried to promote this and pass this celebrity joyride off as a real space expedition. And it infuriates me even more that such a ridiculous, tiresome group of women trivialized something so sacred and labeled it women's empowerment. I remember the old days when being called a female astronaut meant something. Now, again, like, I'm not over here stewing about it still or whatever. I know it's not the biggest thing in the world, but it did irritate me for those reasons and more. But how does this relate to Blake Lively? Well, that stupid Time Magazine honor that she got the other day, and again, I know it's not the biggest thing in the world, but I really do believe, and Candace Owens mentioned this the other day, go away. I really do believe that she got this because it was their attempt at Time Magazine to try to support her through this persecution that I'm sure that they believe that she's experiencing because of this feminist stand that she took against workplace harassment. I guarantee you that if you were to poll people in the media, the mainstream media, I'm not talking about social media, or alternative media, or people that we watch, or Candace Owens or whatever, right? But if you were to poll, I guarantee you, the mainstream media, you would find that 90% of them or more are on Blake Lively's side, on Amber Heard's side, et cetera, even now. And so I guarantee you that Time Magazine, in putting her on that list, even though they didn't explicitly mention any of the Me Too stuff or the Baldoni saga, no, they said it was because of a donation that she had made in 2019 to the NAACP. Give me a break. 2019, we had to reach all the way back there. How do you get on a 2025? I'm sorry, I have to ask Time Magazine a question here. And I know it's annoying as hell. I'm sorry about the nose, but what can I do? I found that, by the way, I've had many cats over the years, and I found that there's always a several-week adjustment period with my allergies, and then I get used to it. You know, you build the resistance to allergies, and it's okay. I need Time Magazine to explain this calculus to me, though, please. I'm terrible at math. I made C's in high school math classes. I'll admit it. Okay, so I need someone at Time Magazine to explain to me, okay, how do you make a list for 2025's most influential people with a 2019 contribution to the NAACP? I don't understand. I'm very confused. But that's what they cited in this stupid article, or this blurb, this about Blake Lively, is she and Ryan had given $1 million to some NAACP fund to combat police brutality and other issues that were near and dear, I'm sure, to Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds' heart. And of course, had nothing to do with the fact that in 2019, everybody was talking about race and racism and the wake of, and there's the wake of the George Floyd stuff and all of that, right? Or was George Floyd hadn't happened yet? I don't know. But you all know that 2019 was like peak race consciousness conversations, right? And so, of course, this couple having gotten married, Blake and Ryan having gotten married on a plantation, a southern plantation, in which some of their guests stayed in old slave quarters and stuff. Like, they were afraid that wasn't going to wear well. And so they decided, I'm just telling you what I think happened. So Blake and Ryan decided that they were going to get ahead of this problem, and they were going to make this big contribution to the NAACP, and it would get a lot of publicity and all of that. And that would then inoculate them against getting, criticism for the plantation stuff, right? And by the way, look, I personally don't have an issue with the plantation thing. I live in the South. A lot of people get married on plantations because they're pretty and whatever. So I'm not judging here, but I'm just saying that by Hollywood standards and modern standards and woke standards, this was a big faux pas, right? And so they were trying to get out from under it by this donation. But Time Magazine, you had to dig up a 2019 donation and use that as rationale for saying that this woman is influential. At least be honest. If you're going to give her this award, say it's because of her fight against workplace sexual harassment. I would have respected you, Time Magazine, a lot more if you had done that and just straight up said your reasoning. But instead, you do this roundabout thing, just like Blake Lively and Ryan did with the stupid fake lawsuit. What is it with all of you people not being able to openly declare your intentions? It is a roundabout thing of nominating her based on this race activism. Come on. But anyway, how does this relate to Blue Origin? Well, to me, it's just another example of a vacuous, insipid, worthless, annoying, tiresome woman being recognized out of some sense of feminism or whatever, right? And it's just dumbing down, watering down the standards for what now qualifies as a big achievement. And that's why it bothers me. It used to be that if you were a, quote, female astronaut, then that was impressive because people understood that if you got to that status in life, or if you held that position, then you were really fucking smart. You were a hard worker. You were adept at technical activities, et cetera. So, like, you were an all-around really impressive person, right? Now, the word female astronaut has been dumbed down to mean Katy Perry and Gayle King and Amanda Nguyen. And I mean, look, don't get me wrong. Katy Perry, she's achieved a lot in life. Like, not everybody becomes a pop star and almost billionaire and all of that. And I'm sure she's a great businesswoman. So I don't want to demean her accomplishments. But this whole Blue Origin thing, it was not her best moment. And all of that sort of silliness and squealing in space. And then she gets off the ship, so to speak, the rocket, kisses the ground. And all of it. It's just like, come on. And this is one of the problems, by the way. I'll get back to Blake Lively stuff in a minute, but this is one of the problems, y'all, with stuff like, not to get too political here, but stuff like DEI, is that what it does is it actually plants the idea in people's heads that this person might not have deserved the job that they have or the award that they've gotten. And so, unfortunately, it demeans the accomplishments of minorities. And so I look at something like Blue Origin, and I look at something like this stupid Time magazine list and Blake Lively on it, and I just think, like, it's just different. They're different expressions of the same bullshit, which is watering down the notion of what a real accomplishment is or what real bravery is, because this ain't it. And we saw the same thing with Amber Heard, and we've seen it with Rachel Wood, and we've seen it with all of these different women who seek to become activists and respected people, respected, intellectuals even, they fancy themselves, on the backs of these false accusations. And there's one more thing before I get back to the Blake Lively stuff and I tell you what I'm pissed off about. Speaking of false activism and everything, this is something that most people in America are still not aware of. And a lot of people in my audience, especially if you're recently joining my audience, are not aware of this story. And I'm not going to rehash the whole thing. But I really feel like one of the most infuriating examples of what I am talking about, what I've been talking about. Sorry, I'm allergic. I have some Sudafed. I might take some. I don't know. That stuff always makes me, it sounds ridiculous, but it makes me feel so wired. Like I can't sleep when I take Sudafed. And by the way, I'm going to go back and look at my super chats in a moment. I saw one there. So a couple of years ago, the German band Rammstein was almost canceled. And if you're not familiar, it's the song Du hast mich. Dun, 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 dun. Anyway, whatever. You know the band, you don't, whatever. They're huge in Europe. They were almost destroyed, completely canceled, based on the allegation of one, I don't know if she's crazy or crazy like a fox or what her deal is, but based on the allegations, the crazy allegations of one woman. And eventually, of course, as these things do, it mushroomed into other allegations. But the allegations, all of them, subsequent allegations, were really watered down, silly things like, yes, I had a consensual relationship with him, but I realized after the fact, years later, that actually there was a power imbalance there. And so it wasn't right. That sort of bullshit, right? But the first and really only serious accusation that almost destroyed this band and its lead singer was this accusation made by this woman, this girl, who claimed that she had been drugged at a pre-party for this band, that the lead singer had spiked her drink with GHB, she thought, and that then when she actually went to the concert, that she couldn't remember a lot of it after a certain point, and she thought that she had been sexually assaulted by the lead singer and frontman. Now, eventually, this story morphed and changed into something else, as these things often do, as they did in Evan Rachel Wood's case, Amber Heard's case, and so forth. Eventually, it morphed into, well, I don't think that anyone drugged me, and I don't think anyone assaulted me, but he did ask me to have sex, and when I said no, he seemed pissed off about it. That is eventually what we got down to. But here's my point. This woman, if you're not aware, because most of my audience, Americans, might not be, this woman, her name was Shelby, this woman was celebrated for months. There was an entire summer, I call it the summer of Shelby. There was an entire summer where this false accuser was celebrated all over Europe by various feminist groups and even governments. She was invited. Well, let me hold on a second. Let me just let me put her picture up here. All right. So here she is before her glow up. And of course, these women, they always get this conservative glow up where they go from looking like party girls to then very like prim and proper ladies. And so this was one of her earlier pictures, but then this was her in a BBC interview. The BBC actually sent reporters to her house to interview her. I mean, she's been on all of the major mainstream European outlets. This was the cover story of Der Spiegel, which, if you know European media, that is like the news magazine for much of Europe. Anyway, here's my point. This ridiculous woman who had absolutely no evidence, whose story, as it were, fell apart immediately, gigantic holes in it. It was laughable. I interviewed witnesses on my show who were with her the whole night who blatantly contradicted what she said and so forth. But this woman, even with that, was able to be a star, a darling of feminist organizations, and yes, even governments. So there were members of the German Bundestag, which is their equivalent of our Capitol Hill, right? And they invited and paid for Shelby to come to an event that they held at the Bundestag and to speak on women's rights and sexual ethics, and of course, again, to blast horrible men and to celebrate Me Too and all that, right? So anyway, hold on, and it is, again, it's annoying, but it's also funny. So here we go. I'm just going to show you just a bit of this mashup that I did.
Oh. We as women are seen as objects. We don't have, it's as if the men speak for us. We don't have our own thoughts, feelings, morals. We live in a man's world, very much so.
I, a woman, would
now understand that she's speaking here to German politicians, and these are like all of these women and men who were there were sitting there very, seriously, contemplatively, and she's just spewing. What is she saying? Women don't have their own morals? What does that even mean? Because men dictate everything? It's so absurd.
Oh. We as women are seen as objects. We don't have, it's as if the men speak for us. We don't have our own thoughts, feelings, morals. We live in a man's world, very much so.
I, a woman, would never truly see it. My voice couldn't fully count.
A woman speaking for herself, how dare she? How dare she have her own thoughts, ambitions, desires? Oh.
And by the way,
okay.
By the way, I just want you to know I'm not looping that. She actually did that whatever that is. It sounds like a horse or something trying to like clear its sinuses. Maybe I should try that. My allergies. She did that multiple times here, and I'm just cutting out extra stuff. But what's so funny is you have all these people standing around applauding, taking it seriously. Okay, I'm gonna play a little more. It's not looped. It's not repeated.
That despite what it took for me to stand up and finally raise my voice and to speak my truth, it didn't really matter. The deck was stacked against me in ways I couldn't even begin to imagine.
Girls, everybody here, we have so much power. You have no idea how powerful we are together.
Yes, yes, enough is enough. Time's up. Me too. Our lives matter.
I will never shut up. Never.
Please shut up. Please. Okay, y'all are familiar with it.
Tell Lindemann.
Okay, so just one more thing, okay? So this ridiculous woman that I was just showing you, Shelby, who did a multi-month summer tour of Europe. She was feted by, celebrated, received by all of these huge feminist organizations. They paid for her travel. She was taken to fancy dinners. Like by the way, she bragged about all of this online. And anyway, but this is the video that she made right after she claims she was assaulted that night. This was the video that started this whole thing. And anyway, again, it's the same kind of histrionics that you see with Amber Heard. It's like they're all following the same script.
This is after Rammstein. Do not meet your idols. F Rammstein. F them. I swear to God. Till Lindemann is a piece of shit.
I'm not a good victim. I get it. I'm not a likable victim.
Now, has it sunk in?
All right, that's enough. Anyway, enough of them. But it's so. I think it's so predictable now, and it's so tiresome. Hold on a second. Bring this up. A little more of me there. It's so predictable. It's so tiresome, and yet they keep getting away with it. And so that's what I thought when I saw that Blake Lively had made that 100 list, is that here again, we've got a woman being celebrated for nothing. And meanwhile, the reason that she's being celebrated really is not because of any contributions that she's made to society or anything. It's because they're wanting to prop up another Me Too false accuser for this bullshit, quote unquote, feminist victim agenda. So let me take a minute and look at super chats. I think I saw one or two, and some more of your comments. Steph, hope it's not Steph Jones, is it? Steph, what's up? Thank you for the super sticker. And again, a number of people like to donate via the PayPal link too, because they know that PayPal takes much less of your money than YouTube does. So I do check PayPal. I see I got a donation from Dwayne. What is up? One of my best supporters. Let me see if you made a comment here. So yeah, if you donate on PayPal and you can make a comment in their comment section, and I will, if you want me to, I will read it aloud, but I don't have to. Okay. You say, hi, Kurtz. That's it? No big pronouncement? What's up? Well, thank you for being here as always. Appreciate you a lot. Anybody else? I'm just scrolling through. So we do have Dan Campbell. I've heard that Dan Campbell might be related to Dwayne, but I'm not sure. Dan says, too drowsy to say anything intelligent. Check PP. We'll catch you next time. Are you talking about me? Why I am drowsy, sir? No, thank you. Appreciate you. And let's see if anybody else. Okay, I want to look at a few of your comments, and then we're going to talk about what pissed me off. You're going to get the rant that you were hoping for. Oh, and by the way, people asking about my hair and the wig. I really want to get the Blake Lively wig, actually. I'm going to bring it out in a minute. We're going to take a break in a minute, and I'm going to bring out, because I feel like actually I could go on for a while. I don't have to work tomorrow. And so if any of you night owls want to stay up, we'll talk more about Blake Lively and Baldoni, and we'll get into some shit that we haven't talked about yet, and look at some things that people are asking online tonight and pointing out. Again, they're in big trouble. They're going to be, and their lawyers pulling this shit are going to be in big trouble. But anyway. But Amanda Lane says, so performative, ick. I don't believe them. Yeah, exactly. It's all hyper performative. And this is one of the things, by the way, when you look at, for example, Evan Rachel Wood's documentary, her 2-part hit piece documentary on Marilyn Manson. When you look at that, there are so many moments that ring absolutely false because you can tell that they're absolutely contrived. For example, some of you may not know this, but in Evan Rachel Wood's documentary, a hit piece on Marilyn Manson, there is an entire scene that is supposed to take place in an FBI office where we're told that we're seeing Evan Rachel Wood being interviewed by the FBI. Turns out completely fabricated and just for show. And you see so many of those types of scenes in that documentary where it's obvious that you're just being fed a fictionalized story. And there is a scene also in that film in that documentary, where Evan Rachel Wood pretends to be frightened for her life, frightened that Marilyn Manson is going to come over to her house and do something to her. And so you see her frantically scurrying around the house, hurriedly packing, picking up stuff, fleeing. And then you see another scene where she's peeking out from behind blinds and everything. And again, it would be funny if it weren't also so tragic. But anyway, what else? 1 second. Sorry, I was bringing back a picture again for people. I like that. I don't know who did that meme, but I do like it. Okay, other comments. Microblue says, Lord, there's always some of these. Yep. Indignantly righteous barrel, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, we've got a long comment here. Let's see what Stephanie Barrett says. She's probably a narcissist, so acting like this, she thinks a normal person with true feelings, empathy, and conscience would act and respond and failing badly. Well, look, this is a really smart observation you're making here, because these manipulative types, they do have some really significant chinks in their armor. And one of them is that because they don't have fully normal, healthy human emotions, they can only approximate, they can only fake, they can only get kind of close sometimes to presenting normal emotions. And so people can often sense that. They can often see through it. And it's like what you're talking about here. We really get the feeling often with these women, just like we did with Amber Heard on that witness stand when she was doing all of these contortions to try to make it look like she was crying, but couldn't get a tear to come out, right? There's always, it's like they're aliens. There's always something a little bit off, you know, like Invasion of the Body Snatchers, where these people or these narcissists are pretending to be normal people, but there's just something that's a little bit off. All right. Anybody else right now? Isabel says they also can't predict consequences. They don't have the part of the brain that tells them there will be backlash. Seems to be the truth in Blake Lively's case. My God, there were so many red flags on the path to where she's found herself. And if she had gotten off, if she had exited, taken those exit ramps at any point, then she could have saved herself all of this trouble and misery and suffering and stress and all the money and all the career damage. But you're right. They often, these narcissists, they're missing, and these borderlines or whatever some of them are, like Amber, they're missing that thing, that part of the brain or the psyche to tell them, no, you can't do this. This will go off the rails. This will bring bad consequences. And I think it does have to do with their egotism, that they really believe that they are smart enough that they can always stay one step ahead of everyone and they can outsmart everyone. And in fact, isn't that what Blake Lively, as it turns out, tried to do, and her team tried to do with this fake subpoena? You know, it's like they're too clever by half, and they end up getting themselves into trouble because they think that they're so clever and they're outsmarting everyone, and it all ends up coming back on them in the end. All right, so I have been on for a little over an hour, and I think I could do 45 minutes more, maybe a little more. But I've got several issues here. One is that I'm about to run out of battery on the computer. It's about to die, and I need to find that, plug that in. Another is that I'm a little bit hungry and need a snack, et cetera, et cetera. So I tell you what, any of you want to come back, no pressure. But if any of you want to come back and we'll talk more, and I will finally get to the thing that's pissed me off, to the rant, then you can. Otherwise, catch it tomorrow. I'm also going to cut a shorter version of this, probably a couple of videos. I might have a guest joining us as well, but we will see. All right, so 15 minutes. I will be back at 11:30 Eastern, and I'm just going to keep this thing open. I think what I'll do is, again, just bring up another video or something. No pressure for you to watch it, but you can stay on the stream and talk to each other, leave, come back, what have you. But I'll be back for those who want to see the rant. No, I'll be back in 15 minutes. All right. And mods, you can leave also if you want to go to sleep. No worries.
If you want to get your name, phone number, and address off the internet, but want to handle the removals yourself,
So this is probably the biggest story since this entire Blake Lively, Justin Baldoni thing started. I'm not even joking. It's huge. Some of you are probably already aware of this development because you've seen Andy Signori's coverage, or Without a Crystal Balls, or CJ, Leanne. I mean, there's so many great people on this now, but I just today, because I've been behind, I've been away for a while, and I really just today sank into looking at what has come out, what has been discovered about the Blake Lively situation. And it's just astounding. It really is. And I think it's going to have huge repercussions in the public narrative, the PR narrative, once this becomes more widely known and more widely understood. For those of you who have not heard of this yet, or you've heard something about it, but you don't really, like me, before I really looked into this today, you really didn't know the particulars or what the fuss was all about. This is absolutely huge. And based on, like I said, the opinions of attorneys that Popcorn Planet has interviewed, and also some attorneys who were cited in the Daily Mail article that came out about this today. And by the way, the Daily Mail, they might have had this story at the same time as Without a Crystal Ball was discovering it, but they sat on it, I think. I think a lot of us can agree that they had this story and they sat on it for whatever reason. And so kudos to Without a Crystal Ball for finding it on her own. And I will link to her account below. But here's basically what happened. Here's some context. Oh, and by the way, for people wondering what's with this random live stream, this is just going to be used as a draft. And immediately after I finish it, I'm pulling it and I'm just going to cut it up and make it into a YouTube video. So don't waste your time with super chats and stuff. But I wanted to have an audience here. I wanted to get this out really quick before I go to work. Here's the deal. Justin Baldoni's former PR rep, Stephanie Jones, the big bad wolf of Hollywood PR, As you know, or may know if you followed this case, she was the head of the PR company that was handling Justin Baldoni's stuff and Wayfarer's PR, right? This was a while back. And what happened was there was a break between Stephanie Jones, the owner of this PR company, and one of her underlings, who was Jennifer Abel, who was Justin Baldoni's immediate and Wayfarer's immediate agent, right? So in these agencies, these PR agencies, you have, just like in any company, you have various levels of things. And you've got the CEO, Steph Jones, at the top of it, and the visionary, and she's the one who calls the shots. But then she has people working for her, agents working for her, publicists working for her, who handle individual companies and clients. And so what happened was there was a break between Steph Jones and this underling, and this underling went to set up her own company. You know, this is like business succession style. This is just how it's done. It's very shrewd. It's smart. It's how it is. Darwinianism, basically, the survival of the fittest or the best. And it's constantly changing. And so this girl goes and she takes one of her best clients, Justin Baldoni, and Wayfarer with her. Yes. And so what happened then is that Stephanie Jones is really pissed off about that and demands the cell phone of this employee, I guess her business phone, and I guess she had to turn it over. And so the employee on her way out turns over the phone. And so now you've got this pissed off, big bad wolf of Hollywood PR, Steph Jones, with this phone, and she has it forensically examined. So she knows the contents of the phone, right? Well, somehow, and here's where we get to Blake Lively and her shenanigans. Somehow, Blake Lively, before she filed her CRD complaint against Justin Baldoni and came out with that New York Times article, basically facilitated that, she had to have gotten her hands on these private texts between Justin Baldoni's publicists, right, and other people. And so that's where a lot, if you'll remember, that's where a lot of the ammunition that the New York Times and that Blake Lively's complaint, that's where a lot of the ammunition came from, was these supposedly private conversations between Justin Baldoni's publicists and other people, right? And so the question was always how, first of all, did Stephanie Jones violate the trust of her client, even former client, Justin Baldoni and Wayfarer, by passing on these messages, the contents of these cell phone exchanges, to Blake Lively's team, who was going after Baldoni, right? So that was always a big question mark here, is how did Blake Lively get her hands on these texts that only Steph Jones would have an incentive to give to Blake Lively, right? And you might say, well, what incentive would she have? Well, remember, again, we're talking about Ryan Reynolds and Blake Lively, and these are two extremely, extremely powerful people in Hollywood, and we've talked about that. And then you have Steph Jones, right, who has every incentive to climb into bed with them, so to speak, and then also who was really pissed off at this employee who left and these big clients that she took with her, right? So it makes perfect sense what the motivations would be here. So the question has always been, how did Blake Lively lawfully and ethically get her hands on these things? Because Steph Jones was not supposed to hand this stuff over to anyone. There are confidentiality agreements in place. It was deeply, deeply unethical of Steph Jones to pass this shit over to Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds and their team, right? So the question was, always, how was this done legally? And this is where we get to the point, y'all, for those of you who don't know. This is where we get to the point. Wait, what's wrong with unknown? Oh, unknown, you're great. You have no money. Yeah, join the club. Sorry, I was responding to the chat. I got distracted. Welcome. Here's where we get to the main shit, okay, everybody? Blake Lively created, and Ryan Reynolds basically used a fake company, a sham corporation, if you will, that they had created sometime before and not really used up till this point. But they used this as a way to basically file a fake underground lawsuit against unknown persons, but persons connected to Wayfarer and Justin Baldoni. And when I say unknown persons, I mean that they were not named. So in this lawsuit that this basically more or less fake company that Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds had set up. And you might say, well, how do we know it's their company and all of that? All of that information has been discussed and answered by other people, and I can certainly get into it in my next show. But I'm just trying to get this out here before I go to work because I think it is so astounding in a lot of ways. They had this sham corporation, Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds, that they had created sometime before, and they decided to use it, or their lawyers, their legal team, whoever the fuck was advising them to do this crazy shit. Wow. I mean, for those of you who've been following the Jay-Z, Tony Busby fiasco, we're getting beyond Tony Busby. We're getting beyond Tony Busby territory with some of these shenanigans. But anyway, so they take this fake corporation basically that they had created. And I'm using the term fake loosely, but this fake company. And this fake company sues unknown persons, John Doe's, whatever, 1 through 10 or whatever it was, right? And they sue them for all kinds of very vague possible business practices that these unknown persons might have engaged in against this company called Van Zandt, by the way. That's the name of the fake company that sued unknown persons. And so basically, y'all, this is the gist of it, is Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds' company, this fake company, Van Zandt, sues unknown persons, but through this lawsuit, this not publicized, trying to keep it hush-hush as possible lawsuit, they are able then to trigger the discovery mechanism whereby they can lawfully get their hands on all of those text messages that Stephanie Jones had access to, because now, as a part of this lawsuit, this fake lawsuit, basically, for all intents and purposes, this fake lawsuit, they can legally subpoena and obtain these texts. And Steph Jones now has cover because she can say, oh, yeah, well, I was subpoenaed, so I had to give up these texts. So it provided retroactive. This is what this lawsuit, this is what this fake lawsuit by Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds did, is it retroactively gave cover to Steph Jones for something that it's clear she had already done, which is she had already shared the content of these relevant texts with Blake Lively. But it now gave her cover to transmit this stuff legally and through proper channels, so that then it could be included in the CRD complaint and also leaked to the New York Times. And guess what? Do you want to hear the fucking clincher on this? If you look at the timelines, and again, kudos to the people who found this. If you look at the timeline of this, what you see is that almost immediately after this fake lawsuit is filed, end of September, against unknown persons, but again, connected to supposedly Wayfarer. And you might say, what were the allegations? I said earlier, they were very, very vague things, right? But anyway, triggered this discovery mechanism, these texts are, so what happens is then, right after this lawsuit is filed, then what you have in early October is then you have a formal request subpoena for these texts on Stephanie Jones' phone. So she is subpoenaed in early October. So late September, this fake lawsuit is filed. Then immediately, early October, you have the subpoena of Stephanie Jones, text returned over. Now you want to hear the even crazier part. Those of you who've been following this, timeline-wise, crazy, is that the lawsuit was voluntarily withdrawn. Now, the people use the term dismiss, but in a legal sense, a dismissal is also can occur when one voluntarily, let me say this again, a legal dismissal can also occur when one voluntarily withdraws their own lawsuit, right? So this is what happened. Mid to late September, the lawsuit is voluntarily withdrawn, meaning that this fake company that Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds were using to obtain this information, these texts, the lawsuit was withdrawn, they withdrew it, and then guess what happened immediately after they withdraw the lawsuit? Then she files her CRD complaint, and you get that big story in the New York Times, that story that was designed with malice, yes, I would say with legal malice, to destroy Justin Baldoni. They just zip in, legally speaking. They just, in terms of the legal maneuverings, they just zip in, they get what they need, and then right before They tear the cap off of the grenade, so to speak, and they throw it. They zip out. They get the fuck out of there, withdraw the case. It is so obvious that this is a sham lawsuit. And let me tell you, these lawyers are in big fucking trouble. And you can go and you can watch that interview with that attorney on Andy Signori's Popcorn Planet for one, but even the Daily Mail in their article, because they did finally publish on this after Without a Crystal Ball exposed it online. But these lawyers, even interviewed by the Daily Mail, say that if this was just a sham lawsuit and a mechanism for illegally or unethically obtaining this information, in other words, they were pretending to do one thing, but they were doing another, you can't do that. That's like actually not sanctioned ethical behavior for attorneys. So these big, fancy Manat attorneys, whoever was running this show and whoever signed off on it, you were in trouble. And Blake Lively, and Andy Signori's guest got into this as well. Blake Lively, if this thing does not settle, look, let me say something here. Blake Lively, people have been pleading with you for months to see the writing on the wall here and to let this thing go and to come to terms with Justin Baldoni and give his team what they want and apologize and back down from this. And you have gotten warning after warning after warning. But girl, the situation that you are in now is that you are facing, if Justin Baldoni does not accept whatever apology or settlement offer you might still throw out, when it becomes clear even to you how bad things have gotten, if he doesn't, girl, then you are looking at a day's worth, basically, of deposition interrogation. And things have suddenly got a lot more fucking serious now that we're talking about you engaging in legal malfeasance, subverting the justice system with fake lawsuits for malintended attacks on an innocent man and on a movie studio, a production studio. And this kind of behavior, it seems a lot of lawyers who've weighed in on this so far agree, this falls outside proper sanctioned legal activity. Like there are things that you can do as a lawyer to get up really just kind of to the edge ethically, but you can get away with it. But this, if it's exposed what you guys were really up to with this shit, I don't see how you get out of this without an intensely unpleasant experience in your deposition and in the months leading up to it. Because we've got a year now, maybe a bit less if things stay on schedule, which they probably won't, but we've got like a year, a little less than a year now, but still a long time, Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds, that you all are going to have to deal with the PR fallout from this shit, from the shenanigans you pulled. And I just have to continue to believe that you just did not think that there was any way in hell that Justin Baldoni would put up the kind of a fight that he and Wayfarer have put up. I just have to believe that if you'd had any inkling, Blake and Ryan, as to the fallout of your actions, as to what you would be facing and what people would be finding out about you now,
My fans, my real fans, my devoted fans, what's up? Hold on. Okay. I'm noticing how crooked my screen is, but since I'm minimized, I guess it doesn't really matter. Again, I am out of town, not at my house. So you came for the rant, right? You want the rant. Here's the rant. I have been watching recently the PBS series, the BBC series Wolf Hall. It's a drama. It's fascinating. It's historical, and it's about Henry VIII. And if you didn't know, he's the dude who had 6 wives, and some of them got their heads cut off, and some of them died. And yeah, it was generally not a good time being his wife. But getting into this show, I have been looking more into history of the period and reading about characters in this show, not just the main ones, not just Anne Boleyn, not just Henry VIII, but more minor characters that pop up here and there. And so I have noticed that historically speaking, and I knew this anyway, but it's something that once again, I'm realizing afresh, anew, reading about history of the period. Women had a hell of a hard time. Men had a hell of a hard time too. They each had a hell of a hard time in different ways. But life for women, talk about hard. It used to be really fucking hard. And I know that it's hard today too. And we haven't conquered death or illness or all kinds of problems that we have, right? But I was reading about the other day a character from this show, and the write-up that I was looking at happened to mention that she married for the first time when she was 12 years old. And she had her first child when she was 14 years old. Now, this was a noble woman. This wasn't some poor, pathetic, poverty-stricken, discarded woman. This was one of the elite. And she married when she was 12 and had her first child at 14, and then she had another child at 16 and another child at 17, and over the years, and then her husband died and she married someone else and had more children. She had, over the course of her life, 3 husbands, tons of children, and a number of them died in early childhood, as happened with a lot of kids. You know, we're so used to now living in an age where we have antibiotics and we have modern medicine that we don't think about the fact that it used to be the norm for most of history. It was the norm that you would lose a significant number of your children before they even grew up. And this was one of the grim, sad facts of life that people of this period, and historically speaking for thousands of years, adjusted to. And it really is only recently that this has not been an expected part of life, this kind of tragedy. I mean, imagine the kind of trauma and the kind of pain that people today go through if they lose one child. And you know, a lot of you in my audience, your parents, you know, that kind of love that you have. Can you imagine if you lost half of your children before they grew up? Can you imagine if in some cases you lost most of your children, even in a number of cases, all of your children? Like, this was what life was like back then, and for most of human history. And one of the things that again strikes me so often about what it was like for so much of human history to be a woman is that despite the fact that men had extremely hard lives too, and it was hard for everyone, there were particular struggles and obstacles that are just heartbreaking that most women, almost all women, had to deal with. And we're talking about basically not being able to freely determine the course of their lives because there were all of these circumstances, whether financial or familial pressure or disease, like we're talking about health issues, all kinds of stuff that really made for life for most people and for most women throughout history, like full of a great deal of suffering. Now, where am I going with all of this? I've talked before too about how my boyfriend is really into history podcasts, and particularly World War II podcast, which I think is pretty normal for a lot of men and some women too. I love history. I've got a few girlfriends who love history as well, and even one is a history professor. But my guy loves history podcast, and he listens to a ton of them, particularly World War II. He was going through a period of phase where it was lots of World War II podcasts, and I find this stuff really interesting. So for the most part, I'm good with it. But what happens sometimes is that sometimes these podcasts are so grim. They are so depressing because it's history and it's war and it's violence and disease and just unbelievable. I mean, I tell him all the time that listening to these history podcasts or watching these documentaries, it's worse to me than any horror film, because the horror film, at least you can say, oh, it's fantasy. These are realities that you're hearing about that real human beings went through. And I've said this before, but one time he was listening to a podcast about what it was like in Berlin after the Nazis fell and the Russians came in. And of course, the Russians were, had been brutalized by the Nazis and obviously held a grudge. And, one of the tragic and horrible, awful facts of war is that often in a lot of wars, there is a lot of rape, and rape even becomes a kind of a tool or weapon of war. And so this podcast that he was listening to, there was a chapter in this podcast or in this book just about rape in Berlin when the Russians came and what women went through. And it was story after story after story after story. And after a certain point, I couldn't listen to it anymore. And I said, no offense, but I can't listen to this anymore. It was so awful and disturbing. And it was just one story after another, after another, after another, of brutal gang rapes and all kinds of stuff. Sorry, I'm not trying to bring everybody on tonight, but here's my point. When I look at someone like Blake Lively and this shit that she is has been trying to pull, and I see the way that she hides behind the mantle of victimhood, and she has been for months and months now in PR, in the public realm, and also in the legal realm. She has been trying to convince us all that she was the victim of harassment by Justin Baldoni, that she is a symbol of Me Too resistance to sexism and to the evils of men and assault, rape, and all of this. And the examples that she comes up with are so ridiculously asinine and complete. Even if we took her at face value, which I don't, these stories that she tells about, oh, I had to watch a birthing video, the trauma of that, the trauma of not being asked first, are you okay with watching this before I show this to you? The things that she has tried to present to us as examples of sexual assault are such an insult, an absolute insult to all of the trauma and pain and suffering that women have suffered for thousands of years. And just the other day, when I was reading about these women during the period of Henry VIII and their stories, and they're basically being more or less used as breeders, as beasts of burden. I'm sure that they wanted kids and loved their children, but like when you're having a kid like every year, and painful, difficult, traumatic births often. And a lot of these children, these babies are dying, or they're dying in childhood, and yet you have to continue, you have to keep going. And your husband may die. You may lose several husbands, but you have to keep going. I think about what people and what women have had to go through, and it is infuriating that someone like Blake Lively is trying to pass off her experience as anything of any significance. And when she says that, oh, it was so traumatic, she claims it was so traumatic to hear Justin Baldoni at one point, she claims, in the car talking about his struggles with the gray areas of consent. And again, I don't even believe this conversation happened. But her claim is that he was talking about times in his past when he was younger where there had been gray areas and he wasn't sure that he had always respected those areas as he might have, or have been as focused as he might have on what the woman was feeling. All these things are very important confessions that someone is they're trying to work through toward the end of toward the goal of raising awareness and of growing and of becoming a better person. And instead of taking it that way, Blake Lively twists it around and distorts it and makes it sound like she was being harassed by Justin Baldoni, having to sit there and listen to him work through these things and talk about these things. Again, all within the context of a movie that they were both working on, that he was directing, that she was involved in, a movie centered around all of these themes, as you know. Sexual assault, domestic violence against women, consent, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And for her and others to take that moments of vulnerability like that, constructive moments of vulnerability, and then distort them and lie about them and paint those as evidence of sexual harassment it's abominable and it's evil. It really is. It is evil. And when I think about what women historically have had to face, and what women, yes, did face when they first entered the workforce in a really powerful way, mid-20th century, and real harassment at times. And I think about all that they had to overcome and all that they had to, deal with and handle silently often because they couldn't complain. And these women, these were strong women. These were exceptional women. And what we have today are a bunch of whiny, aggrieved, victimhood-loving crybabies. And I have to think that a woman like Blake Lively or Amber Heard or any of the others, that these women just do not have anything of substance going on internally. Because if they did, they wouldn't need to gravitate to this really, frankly, disturbing status of a victim. Why would anyone want to be seen as a victim if they weren't? And so when I see the links that Blake Lively has gone to, apparently, to try to destroy Justin Baldoni and to try to take on the mantle of victimhood, like at first when this story broke and when she filed that CRD complaint and the New York Times article came out, and I thought to myself, okay, she's just kind of dabbling in this, right? She's, she wants to dabble in victim status. She wants to be an activist. Also, she's pissed that she got a lot of negative coverage online and that people don't like her. And so she's wanting to blame Baldoni and all of that. And I guess that I thought that this was not a deeply premeditated thing on her part, that she had done this, that Blake Lively, and not to excuse it, but I just thought, oh, this is just a silly, stupid girl, and she stepped into this without thinking, and that's all this is, right? But over the past months, as we have seen and we have discovered all of these ways in which actually behind the scenes she was engaged in, and her people on her behalf were engaged in deeply manipulative, conniving behaviors, I've come to the conclusion that this is a woman who actually, she has, I guess over the past couple of years, she has been just utterly eaten up with anger and resentment toward Justin Baldoni. I mean, to have given so much of her life, we only get a certain amount of time on this earth, and it's not enough. And most of us want to spend that time with our families, or building a satisfying career, or doing good things for the world, or enjoying our hobbies or art or whatever. But instead, this woman voluntarily chose to make her life about these stupid Me Too claims that, oh, some guy showed me a birthing video and I couldn't handle it. And she has no clue. She has no clue the degree of weakness that this demonstrates. She thinks that she's being strong, but that's the crazy catch-22 with these people, is they think that they're being strong, but in fact, all they're doing is demonstrating an incredible amount of weakness. Can't take a joke, can't take a birthing video, can't take an adult conversation on sexuality and the gray areas of consent, can't take this, can't take that. Well, lady, what the fuck? Seriously, Blake Lively, what the fuck are you good for then? I guess what you need, Blake Lively, is some kind of Handmaid's Tale environment where everything would be hermetically sealed off for you and you don't have to be exposed to any adult themes or conversations or anything that make you uncomfortable. I guess that's what you need. Seriously. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is ultimately what I hate most about all of this. I mean, ultimately, I hate the fact that so many men's lives are ruined or are derailed, okay, with these false allegations. But selfishly speaking, for myself and for other women, I hate so much that we are being associated with this kind of wimpiness, this kind of wide-eyed hypersensitivity. Ladies, Blake, the rest of you, if we keep advertising to everyone how weak we are and how vulnerable and how victimized we are, and the world is not a safe place for us, and there's a man around every corner just waiting to rape me, and 1 out of 4 women who go to college are sexually assaulted, at some point, people are going to start believing this, taking it at face value, and men are going to say, and society is going to say to women, well, you know what? I guess we need to go back to the old days of chaperones and curfews. And when you were in college, you had to be home by a certain time, or your dorm would call your parents. Couldn't be around the opposite sex without a chaperone, much less partying with them. And ladies, those careers, those jobs, your dream for a professional life, or how you want to express yourself creatively, intellectually in the future, you can just forget about that, because that world, it's too dangerous. It's too aggressive for you. And if you are allowed into that world, you're just going to target a bunch of men and say that they sexually harassed you and get them Me Too'd out there. That is the environment, Blake, and those like you, that you are creating for yourself, for all of us, for future women, because this lesson that you keep trying to teach, it will eventually be taught. It will sink in. And when people get the message, or when they believe you, or when they're tired of hearing women constantly complaining about, oh, he said this and it offended me, or this or that, or making up lies about relationships after the fact because you couldn't deal with being dumped. And so you say, oh, he raped me. This stuff will sink in, and there will be a reaction, a counter-reaction, and it's going to be a loss of freedom for women. And I grew up in a very conservative, very repressive East Texas Southern Baptist home. I've talked about this before. And I hated all that repressiveness. I wanted to get away from it. And then what happened is, when I got into college and grad school, I see that these supposed feminists, who I thought were supposed to be standing up for women's independence and strength and freedom and breadth of experience, instead, what they seem to be obsessed with doing is coming up with as many reasons as possible why women don't need to be allowed into any sphere other than the hermetically sealed, safe home environment. So that's why I'm mad, Blake Lively and others. One of many reasons is because you are screwing over a lot of women and you don't realize it. Blake Lively, you're screwing over your daughters and you don't realize it. Because you narcissistically couldn't deal with some criticism, and couldn't deal with taking a little bit of heat for a few months and moving on with your hundreds of millions of dollars that you made from your film and on to the next project. You couldn't do it. And now you have made, Blake Lively, you and Ryan Reynolds, you have made your entire life now, and for the foreseeable future, your entire life, about this stupid fantasy psychodrama that you've cooked up all in your head. It's just astounding. It is just so astounding. And it's not good. It's not good for you, your daughters, me, other women, and certainly not for the men that you're falsely accusing. It is not good. But this wallowing in weakness, I look at women of the past, I look at past generations and the strength that they had to show every single day just to survive often. And then I see what women have become, a bunch of, and a lot of men too, right? But so many women, wussy ass, whining, complaining, victimhood addicted. It's just really sad. But that's why it's always important, and more important than ever, for us to continue having these conversations and stand up against it and point it out. And Blake Lively, she is in deep shit now. This stuff that's coming to light, I have to think there'll be more of this type of shit because these people have dug themselves in obviously extremely deep, and I don't think we know the half of it. So it's going to be interesting to see. But man, what a turn. What a turn. Everybody, I'd like to read your comments, but I am tired. Actually, it is almost 11. I think my body's telling me it's time to hang it up. But yeah, I'm probably going to cut a video out of this. Not much of a rant after all, but I was tired. But anyway, thanks for joining me. And yeah, I will see you later. Check out my links below. Check out my channel if you're new to it. And thanks to my mods again. Bye-bye. I think.